How's it going, everybody? So in this video, we're going to be responding to a comment that I got about 2 months ago on the video that I did about nettle root extract and how I was blown away with the benefits at the time. And this comment is by a newer subscriber of mine named David Chung, and he wrote me a pretty long comment with about 9 paragraphs, just kind of explaining his own opinions on what he believes and his experiences with different nootropics and substances and herbs and things. A lot of which is good information, and some of which I definitely don't completely agree with. And so back then I actually wanted to respond to it, but I could never find the time to type out a response to each and every point that he made, so I just figured I'd make a video in the future sometime, because this is actually a very informative topic anyway, and it's something that my response to, I think a lot of people would gain a lot of benefit from our kind of dialogue here. So I'm probably going to name this like Troubleshooting Tonic Herbs and Nootropics or something like that. Or troubleshooting adaptogens, because that's a bit more in alignment with this. But let's kind of dive in, okay? Because this is all about how to get the most out of these things and what to expect with your experiences and how to run experiments and things like that as well. So, David Chung. So this is a video again. Like I'm talking about how I started taking nettle root extract again, and I felt like it was the determining factor in like the magical ingredient added to my stack at the time, because I've experimented with nettle root extract before for a good month and a half or so as a part of a kind of ergogenic athletic performance enhancing stack I was doing in January of 2022 that worked really well for me. And I've been trying to get the kind of combination or the stack right for a long time. And I found nettle root extract seemed to be the missing ingredient I was looking for. So got a lot of comments on here. So here's what he says. David Chung says, when I experiment with something, I keep all variables the same and add one thing only. Never add 2 items at once. One will not be able to figure out what is doing what to the body. Hopefully, we're not changing any other variables when experimenting with nettle root. Okay, well, so first of all, I don't remember exactly what I had said in the video that triggered this statement or this rebuttal or comment or whatever, but generally, so first of all, anytime I make a video about an herb or a supplement or a diet change that I've done, by the time I make a video, I have gone forward and back, experimenting for a long time, and also modifying other potential confounding variables, whether they are the same before or not, to really isolate what nettle root extract or whatever herb or diet in question is doing to me. And there's a couple of nuances and caveats we got to talk about here. So the first one is, even if you keep everything the same and add something new into your stack, you should still be skeptical about your results, because things you were doing before might change the results you're getting with the herb or the nootropic or whatever you're experimenting with, independent of that herb. Okay, or supplement or whatever. So, for example, one thing people kind of take for granted is that every single person, generally, especially in these studies on like ashwagandha and everything else, everybody takes caffeine, but like pretty much as a given. It's not an absolute, obviously, but the majority of people, you could be pretty confident in these studies, the results are confounded with caffeine usage. Just because you add in ashwagandha or nettle root on top of your everyday routine that you've been doing for a long time, if you get a certain effect taking coffee and like eating a ketogenic diet, for example, by adding, let's just say, nettle root extract into your routine, that effect you get from nettle root may be different if you remove the caffeine altogether. Even though you're already, everything was the same before, you were already taking caffeine before, and the only thing you changed is you added nettle root into your routine. Okay? The fact that you are taking caffeine on the side, maybe you've been taking daily cordyceps or ginseng for a long time, and you've been eating a ketogenic diet for a long time, to make a video saying, hey, nettle root extract is like the best thing ever, and not, entertaining the fact that my subscribers or the viewers, they may not be doing nettle root extract. Like if they add nettle root extract in their routine, but they're not also, following my other daily habits, like, say exercising daily, like at a vigorous level, sleeping well, eating a ketogenic diet, drinking as much caffeine as I am. Maybe they're not drinking any caffeine at all. Who's to say that my experience with nettle root is going to provide the same benefit to the viewers who are not also doing everything else that I've already been doing? So what I'm saying here is, this person says, add one thing in at a time. Yeah, that is obviously a rational thing to do. But when I say, hey, I need more experimentation to verify that these results are, valid from the nettle root, what I'm saying is, like, there are things I might have been taking, beforehand that I'm still taking, and I add nettle root in, and maybe there's, a synergistic effect that isn't just a nettle root alone, but it's a nettle root combined with some other things that I'm doing, okay? The thing with me is I'm extremely skeptical about my own experiments, skeptical about the results that I get, skeptical about placebo. I'm skeptical about the reductionistic jargon that comes out of scientific studies on these things, which we're going to get to here in a while, further down this person's comment. I'm so skeptical that just because I've experimented with an herb or a diet for a year or 2 years and gotten a certain result, it doesn't mean that I'm going to put all my faith in the results of that experiment alone, okay? Because, the majority of people on the internet, first of all, that are sharing their advice about herbs and stuff, they might have taken an herb for a week or 2 weeks, or followed a diet for a week or two, and then just jumped the gun and told everybody on their YouTube channel that, all these benefits, and it's backed by a freaking isolated lung study in a petri dish, or, there's like a 3-day trial on hypogonadal rats or something like that. And they're like, look, that means it's been proven to work, and my 2 weeks of taking this herb has shown my testosterone levels, like my DHT levels are completely fucked, or so, whatever. People claim absolutist facts about their experiences. They're like, I took this herb and it changed my life, or I took this herb and it made my gonads fall off, or something, right? With very little experience, skepticism, or research, or critical thinking involved. So my channel is a little bit different. My experiments are very different. Even if I keep everything the same, there's still a lot of confounding variables. So I try to do very thorough experiments and really have a deeply intimate connection with the herbs, the supplements, and the diets that I follow. So when you listen to me and you hear me talk about something, especially something like ashwagandha, cordyceps, rhodiola, something I've been taking for a long time on and off, you're going to get bits and pieces of the full story that eventually develop over time. Okay. I basically have had long-term relationships with most herbs. Now, nettle root extract is something that I'm kind of flirting with still. Taking, make no mistake, for large chunks of time, but I'm still skeptical about how I'm getting these results, right? Not to discredit my video on nettle root and the benefits that I got, because many people have messaged me after making that video saying that their libido went through the roof, their energy and motivation went through the roof. So, it is what it is. But the other thing is, adding one thing at a time and not changing anything else, there's a lot of substances out there that are better used in a stack, or that are the experiment. The whole purpose of the experiment is to experiment with the stack. So, for example, the first time I took nettle root extract, the things that stayed the same was my diet. It was, relatively low carb, mostly meat, with a little bit of berries and fruit here and there, and some non-starchy veg just for flavor, so to speak. Training hard, the same as I was before, and still taking rhodiola, for example, and cordyceps. But I added nettle root extract with Polyrhacus black ant and pine pollen, which are supposed to synergize with nettle root extract and have a synergistic kind of testosterone boosting, dopamine boosting effect. Not necessarily scientifically proven, but that's the idea behind it, right? That's the mental model that we're using. And so just adding the nettle root alone isn't really the experiment per se in that situation. The experiment was the nettle root is supposed to have like a 5-alpha reductase inhibition effect, which allows more of the androgenic effects from the Polyrhacus black ant and the pine pollen to flow freely into fruition, so to speak, so that I'm not just like turning over a lot of the androgenic effects into things like estrogen, estradiol, or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nuance that you need to keep in mind when you're talking about adding one thing at a time, okay? And just a little kind of side note, I have a subscriber. He goes by the screen name of like Twerking Man or Twerk for Work or something. And hopefully he's watching this. I sometimes wonder if he has enough patience to watch a full video like this all the way through. But if my information's been working for him and my advice has held beneficial to him, then he probably has cultivated the presence and mindfulness ability to do so. Well, anyway, he's been asking me and bothering me in the comments, like at least one comment every week since that last video was made, asking me when I'm going to update on my experience with nettle root. And my answer to you is never. No, actually, I don't know, because right now I'm really busy and in the heat of living my life and preparing for this tournament. So I've just been keeping everything consistent and not really focused as much on adding or taking away nettle root. So I guess that experiment's kind of on hold for now. So I'll give an update after my tournament, okay? Or maybe as a part of like my daily supplement routine or something, right? Anyway, so sorry, Twerk for Work or Twerking Man or whatever. Collecting Conqueror as you go by on Instagram. No updates yet. All right, so on to the next part of this person's comment. David Chung says, also, after adding a supplement, one has to take it for a while until the body gets into an equilibrium. Not many supplements are able to provide a constant level of benefits. For example, rhodiola, ecdysterone, acetyl L-carnitine, also known as Alcar, they become ineffective over time, David Chung says. David Chung continues, Alcar overloads one's cholinergic system, for example, over time. Many hormetic supplements are harmful over the long term. Okay, so this comment I disagree with for sure. Okay, but then again, there's some element to truth. So, first of all, after adding a supplement, one has to take it for a while until the body gets into equilibrium, he says. So I mean, first of all, there's a lot of supplements that give you an immediate benefit, which he's kind of inferring here. He's saying that basically when you first start taking something, it gives you an immediate benefit, but then over time, the benefits kind of fade away, and either they make you feel like shit, or they, like ashwagandha can provide a good kind of like calming effect at first, but then over time it can cause hyperthyroidism or just make you lose all motivation altogether. He's saying it can have negative side effects over time, but at the beginning it feel good. Or Or he's saying that basically when you first start taking something like rhodiola, for example, it can work really good in the short term, but then as time goes on, you might just not feel anything at all. That's what he's saying. So there's a couple things to mention. So first of all, rhodiola, he mentioned. Rhodiola, I've made videos about this before, okay? And when you talk about the body, you have to take something for a while, then it gets into equilibrium. And when you talk about hormetic supplements are harmful over the long term. What we're really talking about here is the concept of adaptogenic herbs, okay? Not exclusively, but hormesis, right? Hormesis is the idea that like polyphenols, for example, you take a small dose and at first it can damage the body, but over the long term your body actually becomes stronger by developing stronger defenses against the hormetic stressor or the polyphenol or the adaptogenic herb that you take over the long term. So for example, let's say curcumin from, wait, no, that's a bad example. Let's say glucoraphanin from freaking broccoli sprouts, right? Broccoli sprouts? Hashtag Rhonda Patrick. Let's say glucoraphanin or indole-3 compounds from like freaking broccoli, right? Maybe not indole-3 compounds, but glucoraphanose. You take a little bit in the short term, right? And what happens is your NRF2 pathways, your glutathione pathways detect it as a threat, and it's causing reactive oxygen damage in the short term. And then as you continue taking it over the long term, in small enough amounts, usually what you'll find in like a cup of broccoli a day, not from supplements. Because when you take isolated polyphenols in supplement form, those can be damaging because your body is not supposed to absorb that much at once. And it gets even worse when you take it with pepperine to increase the absorption. Yeah, that can be harmful because your body's not meant to develop defenses against that. But anyway, short-term broccoli sprout extract, glucoraphanose, maybe some ginsenoside compounds, the so-called active ingredient of adaptogenic herbs, they cause a hormetic stress. They cause a damaging effect on your immune system or on your cells. They cause cellular damage in small amounts in the short term, the same way that when you go and you do a workout, you break down your muscle tissue, right? But then as you continue, and the body will adapt over time, and your immune system actually, you get an increase in glutathione, superoxide dismutase, and other endogenous defense mechanisms, your body gets stronger. Your immune system gets stronger to better protect you over time. And that, in and of itself, that's hormesis. A little bit of damage, a little bit of a stressor, a little bit of a poison or a toxin can actually build defenses, make you stronger over time. And your body can basically supercompensate, so to speak, even though supercompensation is basically a scientifically inaccurate term. But that's the way you conceptualize it. That's a mental model you can think of it as. So yeah, hormetic supplements, so rhodiola, for example, okay? In regards to this conversation, we're talking about adaptogenic herbs. We're talking about taking herbs like rhodiola. And rhodiola is one that only gets stronger over time, usually, provided you're taking the right dose. If you're taking rhodiola, and this guy specifically said rhodiola, the thing you have to understand is so first of all, the equilibrium that builds up. So there's enzymes that upregulate as a kind of tolerance mechanism to many substances. So for example, antidepressants, like traditional, I think second generation SSRIs, don't quote me on the generation, but antidepressants, in the short term can actually make your problem worse. But if you take them in the right dose, usually a smaller dose, over a very long time, or over a long time, over a course of months, what can happen is the tolerance effect, right? Like for example, when you take caffeine, you get downregulation of receptor sites, and supposedly adenosine and other things, and dopamine. You get an increase in the number of receptors and a decrease in the a sensitization. You get a desensitization over time, right? That's an adaptation to caffeine. The same thing can happen when your body so-called brings its receptors into equilibrium from antidepressant usage. And when it comes to things like rhodiola and ginseng, okay, so if you take these things in the short term, even especially in high doses, yeah, you can find extremely potent, like significant effects in the short term. If you take 1 gram of a 3% Rhodiola rosea extract, 1 gram, that's 3 to 4 times the clinically kind of active amount that most people need to feel the benefits that are most commonly claimed by rhodiola. You might actually feel an overwhelming sense of calmness and sedation, and it might make you feel lethargic. However, if you take 100 milligrams, like a very low dose of the right rhodiola extract, you'll actually feel the opposite. You'll feel a stimulation, you'll feel euphoria, and as long as that dose is proper, okay, over time, what you'll notice is the effects start to seem more and more like a higher dose of rhodiola, right? The sedation and lethargy we mentioned before. And that's not building a tolerance. That's your body adapting and actually the substance building up over time and potentially building more receptor sites and whatever enzymatic downregulation that might happen over long term, to where it's not so much that you have built a tolerance to it or that you have, the herb has suddenly started to have a negative effect, but more so that you need to take less because you've built it up in your system over time, okay? And this is a common thing you'll see with a lot of substances, right? Where there's a lot of pseudo-loading phase. Anyway, a lot of things here, a lot of moving parts, sorry. Hopefully this is making sense, but with things like rhodiola, or ashwagandha especially, which I don't recommend ashwagandha, but better thing, so rhodiola, ginseng, even like gynostemma and jiagalon, which I'm actually sipping on right now. Siberian ginseng, also known as eleuthero. Don't correct me, I know it's not a real ginseng, whatever. Less is more, okay? The problem is we're in at least I am in a Western country where it's like modern culture in general. We want a larger quantity of lower quality products at a very low price. We sacrifice quality for quantity all the time. You can see this in social media with like 10-second TikTok videos, and the list goes on. Lower quality, higher quantity, and we think more is always more. Like I could so tell by a lot of people's comments on my YouTube, like they're just taking way too much of these things. And so with rhodiola, yeah, if you're taking too much, it can have a negative feedback. Is that not a negative feedback loop? Pass the point of negative returns or whatever. Over time, you get a negative effect if you take too much. Okay, but if you understand the dosing range in studies and you take a tiny dose over time, the so-called equilibrium that builds up are, your body building an adaptive power to stress and to, damage and other things, environmental stressors and training and stuff. And you'll get the endurance boosting effects, the stress improving effects, and you won't have these problems like a lot of people have insomnia and things. Well, it's because you didn't find the right dose. Or maybe just for whatever reason, your own specific neurology is different than others. But to just claim in absolutist terms that rhodiola can be harmful over the long term, or can be ineffective over time, we are making an absolutist claim with that needs to be examined further. There's so many other factors involved. And yeah. So then acetyl L-carnitine. So I've actually had some good experiences with acetyl L-carnitine. Alcar, So he says overloads the cholinergic system. Cholinergic system. Well, so acetyl L-carnitine has a lot of different benefits and effects, and so obviously improving the synthesis or the turnover of choline and cholergenic compounds is one of them. Obviously, it also improves the efficiency of, utilizing certain fatty acids at the level of mitochondria. I've found it stacks really well with a ketogenic diet and high amounts of MCTs, actually. Very, very well. I think it might actually improve, it might actually speed up the keto adaptation process, actually, of a ketogenic diet. That's something that I found anecdotally, it seems. But as far as the effects on the choline system, that I have found to be relatively accurate if you take too much. For Alcar, I found around 750 to maybe 1,500 milligrams a day works well in the short term. But yeah, if you take too much too soon, you get headaches, you get insomnia, you get agitation and aggression and frustration, and irrational stress feeling. And so, that could just be that you need to lower the dose for a while, or that you need to do a every other day kind of protocol, because it's not black and white. It's not just either this is good or this is bad, or either my choline is being stimulated by Alcar or it's not. Basically, when you take Alcar, if you start to notice the negative effects of too much choline, if you stop taking the Alcar the next day, that the choline effects don't just leave your system completely. There's a lagging kind of, the half-life is still at play. It's still being eliminated from your system. So the next day, you're going to have maybe, let's just say, for example, half of the Alcar in your system. So you're still experiencing the effects of the Alcar. It's just that they're fading slowly. And so what I'm saying is, if you start to notice an overload of choline effects from Alcar, maybe you should take it in lower doses. Maybe you should take it in lower doses and do an every other day approach. That way you get just the right amount, and then it kind of tapers off, and you don't experience these crazy high fluctuations. You experience kind of ebbs and flows. But again, like something like Alcar, you shouldn't use that in the same discussion as something like rhodiola, because rhodiola has a very different mechanism of action than something like Alcar. Alcar, in my opinion, you can kind of think of it as a short-term, let's just say, stimulant. It's not a stimulant, okay, but it helps the body produce energy. It can help the body stimulate neurology of the mind, the choline system, and certain effects on things like dopamine and whatnot, and maybe neuroadrenaline. It has like a very powerful and potent short-term energetic or stimulating effect, in the sense of stimulating energy production, stimulating neurotransmitters that make you more alert and stuff. And so you don't even need to use Alcar over the long term anyway. Alcar should maybe be used as a part of a certain stack. Maybe for me, I've used it with Hyperzine A and like Alpha GPC or something, and really start on the low end of the dose. And I tried using it every day for a while, and yeah, the overabundance of choline was bad. Like extreme sweating and no sleep and just like crazy mental status. So anyway, yeah, I mean, but that, yeah, so there's that. All right. So now so the next part of this comment, anything that interferes with brain chemistry. So David Chung says anything that interferes with brain chemistry is typically no good, although there may be exceptions. For example, nicotine and cabergoline are no good over the long term, although they will boost libido, testosterone, etc. They interfere with the dopamine system. Dopamine is a king of neurotransmitters. It is powerful and dopamine being the king of neurotransmitters, I don't know about that. It is powerful, and messing with it can have profound downstream effects. Mecunapurins and L-tyrosine almost directly affect dopamine pathways. Okay, so they do directly affect dopamine pathways, provided there's no downregulation of certain enzymes or anything. But yeah. Using them is like using a sledgehammer to kill a fly. So that's a pretty good way of describing that. They may work, but you have a good chance of doing unnecessary damage. If one is to affect the dopamine system, it probably should be indirect. Exercise, sleep, food, etc. So first of all, I think that people rely way too much on things like mecunapurins, phenylalanine, L-tyrosine, PEA and cacao and stuff like that. Yeah, I would not disagree. However, I think the so-called damaging effects in the dopamine system are far overblown. I have used megadoses of tyrosine. There are studies on megadoses of tyrosine. I've used megadoses of mucuna. I haven't noticed any crazy horror story effects like I've heard from other people. And there's some things that have made me feel some pretty negative effects, for sure. And mucuna and tyrosine, the most thing that's ever happened to me taking those things is like I take them for a while, they stop working over time. Or I'll take them, and after a while, they'll just make me feel really tired and lethargic instead of actually making me feel better and motivated like they used to. And so when I stop taking them, maybe for a day or two, I might feel maybe a little low energy or something like that. But it's not like this long-lasting, dreadful, damaging thing that people claim. People make L-tyrosine and mucuna sound like it's meth, and that when they try to come off of it, it ruins their life like a meth addiction or something. That is literally what I've seen in like Reddit forums, Launch City, which is an old-school biohacking forum, Amazon reviews, and YouTube comments, and like when you read comments from more rational, down-to-earth people who have used mucuna and tyrosine, even in higher doses for a long time, which traditionally mucuna and L-tyrosine have been used at much higher doses in studies than what these people that claim that it destroyed their life or ruined their life are claiming. And let's remind ourselves that most people who are experimenting with tyrosine and mucuna, they're doing it to try to self-medicate for things like depression, ADHD, and other mental issues already. And typically, at least in my opinion, from what I found, as someone who was in and out of mental hospitals as a child with supposed lifelong mental illness that I solved on my own using nutrition, lifestyle changes, and these herbs and things, by the way, over a decade ago, I solved my issues. What I find is these people who are trying to self-medicate with these herbs and things are much more likely to have nocebo effects where they overblow some minor side. Like they might feel a little tingling in their hand, and all of a sudden they're like, oh God, I'm having a heart attack, fuck. And then next thing you know, they make a crazy long 15-paragraph essay on like a Reddit forum or something like that, or a YouTube comment, just trying to warn everybody about the tingly hand syndrome they experience from like 5 milligrams of caffeine in like a decaffeinated Coca-Cola or something. Like I've had that happen to myself when I was younger. So I'm just saying, like, that's something to consider. So what I'm saying is, you should not be relying on dopaminergic things like mucuna and shit to heal life issues, but the dangers are overblown. So these people that are having these crazy experiences, by the way, with tyrosine and mucuna, are the very ones that need to not take those herbs or those supplements anyway. Those people probably have some deeper rooted mental issues that are grounded in their philosophy of life and their psychology. And probably their nutrition is not on point. They're not eating enough protein. They're probably not exercising in the proper way and dose that would help to relieve their stress issues. There's probably a lot more going on there. You see this with things like lion's mane as well, for example. Anyway, so I mostly agree with that, but kind of disagree at the same time. So David Chung continues, things like protein powder, creatine, and magnesium are great because they are not dirty. It doesn't do anything weird to one's brain. And research behind them is solid. Biotin, a little bit of vitamin D3, vitamin K2. He says you probably don't need this because you eat a lot of meat. I disagree with that. And then AAKG, which I believe he's talking about arginine, alpha ketoglutarate probably. And then glycine, etc. He claims that those don't do a lot of weird things to the brain and whatnot. So glycine can actually have a profound effect on people's brain. It can tremendously improve symptoms of insomnia and anxiety, but some people claim that it could do the opposite over the long term. And I disagree with this claim that you don't need extra vitamin K2 if you eat enough meat. The studies on vitamin K2, MK4, show around 45 grams a day. That's 45,000 milligrams. Wait. 45 milligrams. That's 45,000 micrograms. That's the dose used. Of MK4, vitamin K2, has been, they've shown a remission in osteoporosis using that dose over like a 4-week span. Decalcification of the dental tartar, and there's a lot of evidence in remission or in decalcifying arteries per se. It is a correlation, more of a cohort study, and you don't get that from meat or cheese alone. Like you'd have so even chicken legs, so dark meat chicken and pork. A lot of people don't know are actually the feed of those animals are supplemented. If you're eating traditionally raised, like conventional raised chicken and pork, it's actually tremendously higher in vitamin K2, MK4, because the feed of those feedlot animals was supplemented with MK3. And so you get like these, the dark meat chicken or whatever that has something like, I think it's like, 200 micrograms of MK2 or MK4 vitamin K2. In dark meat chicken or whatever per 4 ounces. So that's a lot. But even if you were to eat those like artificially fed vitamin K2 chickens or whatever, you're still not going to, even if you eat 2 pounds a day, you're not going to be able to get the 45 milligrams that you need to produce the same results in the study. So this claim that you probably don't need vitamin K2 because you eat a lot of meat is not entirely accurate. Even if you eat grass-finished beef, eating grass-finished animals, you believe it or not, in the modern age, because they're usually not supplemented with the MK3 or whatever, the vitamin K3, you might actually get less vitamin K2 from grass-finished animals. So that's an interesting spin on things now. This is the thing. No, I haven't heard anyone mention this stuff on YouTube except for me. Because people just repeat everything they've heard from others, unfortunately. And that's on the grass-finished beef topic. But anyway, as far as that comment's concerned, yeah, I agree. Protein powder, magnesium, these things are relatively benign. But this comment is kind of making it sound like you should be very scared of taking herbs and supplements that influence brain chemistry. And I just feel like, and this is a video about nettle root extract. Nettle root extract is nothing like I guess it's so-called it's claimed effects on hormones and stuff can make people be scared, but it has never been shown that I'm aware of creating any kind of negative outcome as far as hormones or neurology. Maybe kidney issues, maybe, but mostly it's just positive as far as kidney health. So I don't even know why we're talking about how these things can talking about all the negative effects of nootropics and stuff on a video about nettle root extract. But I guess it's just because I was expressing such a profound excitement about my short-term effect in my previous experiments with it. But the next thing he says is, David Chung says, a good supplement tends to be subtle and is almost not noticeable for boosting one's mood or energy. A lot of times, what one perceives as energy increase is merely overexcitation of the nervous system. Also, such a purported effect is difficult to distinguish from placebo effects. Okay. And he says the only objective way to know of a supplement's efficacy is through objective measurement, such as a strength gain. I don't agree with this at all. Body fat loss, but without any loss in strength. While all this is happening, one's mood should be fairly constant. If there is any uplift in mood, it should be due to overall increase in health and fitness, not through interference with brain chemistry. Yeah, I strongly disagree with this. So the primary reason why most people get into adaptogens, nootropics, and nutraceuticals is because they're looking for a tremendous increase in one's mood or energy. And you have to also understand the word energy is mostly nebulous. You need to define what that means. So there's two types of energy. The first type of energy is from the, physical energy, like substrates, right? Physical chemicals your body can burn. Basically, food, basically. So things like carbohydrates and fat molecules, okay? Basically ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So you can do something like let's just say you eat white rice and your body break down the polysaccharides or whatever, and eventually turns into ATP and glycogen and glucose that your body can turn into usable energy through exercise and whatnot. So that's from eating food from the day before. And yeah, that should definitely not create any noticeable and crazy spikes in energy or mood, for sure, because that's physical energy substrates that your body self-regulates, okay? Now, there's a second form of energy that people don't talk about, and that is substances or mood states that enhance our neurology, our neurotransmitters, and things like that, okay? And I think that David Chung is trying to say that neurology or neurotransmitters increasing is a bad thing, but that's very far from the truth. So first of all, let's give an example, caffeine. So caffeine not only increases neurotransmitters like adrenaline and dopamine and whatnot, and maybe cortisol, but it also, by increasing adrenaline and cortisol, it also increases a breakdown of physical energy substrates like fatty acids in our fat tissue, and increases a conversion of real tangible food energy into physical performance. So you actually burn more physical energy by taking caffeine, and that's one of the reasons why it has such a profound effect on things like fat loss. It's one of the only effective ingredients in any fat loss formula, as well as improving cognition and physical performance and increasing endurance and pain tolerance and stuff, is because it directly increases the breakdown of fatty acids for energy, and increases, it can potentially increase things like endorphins indirectly and things like that. So the other thing is that, so overexcitation of the nervous system. What exactly do you mean by overexcitation of the nervous system, and how do you measure overexcitation? As far as I'm aware, biologically speaking, there's only excitation of the nervous system, and that's a spectrum. And different amounts of excitation are ideal for different situational modalities. When people are trying to, let's say, fight off a freaking gorilla, you want as much nervous system excitation as possible, I guess, because you could generate enough force to freaking destroy the gorilla, I guess, right? But if you're taking, let's say, an exam for college, you want just enough nervous system excitation to get your mind kind of in that free-flowing alpha state, But then you also want a calming and grounding effect to offset the nervousness of and anxiety of taking the test altogether. That's why people take things like caffeine combined with L-theanine so that they can get the excitation in the nervous system, but then like the kind of grounding and calming effects put them in a flow state from the increase in things like NMDA and GABA signaling from the L-theanine. So like there's no such thing as an over excitation in the nervous system. There's a effective range of excitation depending on the task at hand. When I'm competing in jiu-jitsu, I like to be extremely like off the chain. I like to get slapped in the face as hard as possible. I like to freak out and beat my chest and like just go ham. But when I'm training, I like to be in an alpha state where I'm calm yet stimulated, so I can pick up new opportunities and stay calm under pressure and learn new tasks, which is not going to happen if I'm just freaking out on like some crack or something, right? So anyway, a good supplement, okay, boosting one's mood or energy. Look, this idea that an increase in strength is a good indication. There's very little supplements that have been shown to improve strength by objective measurements per se, whether in blood tests or in actual 1 rep max tests using studies. Okay, this is good. If you're going to look for that, it has to be all anecdotal experience, unfortunately. The ones that they found outside of things like creatine, for example, they found ashwagandha. There's one study that showed like a crazy, like a three time increase in kilograms of bench press 1 rep max compared to the control group using ashwagandha over a period of like 8 weeks or something. 3-time improvement on bench press from taking ashwagandha, that's hard to fucking believe. Because like in like a matter of 8 months, that's a 2-month training cycle. Even as a newbie, like just starting training, you don't even see that effect with good, training principles, training program, and food. So I'm just saying, like, I agree that it would be a good effect to see an improvement in things like strength gain over time or body fat loss without any loss in strength. But to say that a good supplement tends to be subtle and it's almost not noticeable for boosting mood and energy, that is not like a generalizable statement that applies to everybody who's looking at content on these things. That is your own preference, and that's fine. But as far as people who are trying to push the limits of their business, like, people take nootropics for very specific reasons, for very specific occasions. A good supplement for somebody who's trying to tear a competition apart, a good supplement for somebody who's trying to compete at the highest levels in jiu-jitsu is not going to be the same thing as a good supplement for somebody who's trying to become a world record holder in playing chess, or somebody who's trying to read a biology textbook front to back. They're going to need a completely different supplement or herb or whatever than somebody who's trying to break the deadlift world record, okay? So I just don't understand this idea that all of these things, like, these are absolutist terms used in a general sense that just, they don't have much, like I see what he's getting at. Like, you don't want to always be on the extreme, okay? And you want to make sure that everything is taken in moderation and in proper doses, and you don't always want to be on the edge of dopamine or edge of testosterone. Like, I'm all about that, right? I think for the average person, most of the time, people should be taking a high quality extracts of low-level adaptogens, right? For example, ginseng, rhodiola, whatever, but at a low enough dose to where you just get a subtle kind of stimulation. And I think you should have a noticeable increase in mood and energy. I think that's one of the hallmarks of good adaptogens and nootropics. And there are a lot of compounds out there that do that. There's some that I haven't even taken, like Subroxy and polyagna or whatever, which is something I want to try. Panax ginseng, eleuthero, diagolon, also known as gynostemma, rhodiola, What are some other ones? Shazandra. There's a lot of them out there that you will notice a noticeable benefit and noticeable improvement. Even like a 1 to 2 caffeine to L-theanine ratio. Even something as simple as like matcha green tea. Okay, if you take it right, you'll have a tremendous benefit on focus and energy and things, right? With something as simple as matcha green tea. And that's something that has a lot of very solid evidence backing its health benefits over time, including increases in protection of neurons and dopamine receptors and stimulating brain-derived neurotropic factor and other things, epicatechin gallate, L-theanine, and all sorts of other beneficial effects from the matcha green tea. And you get a crazy improvement in calmness and focus from the matcha green tea in addition to the long-term health effects. Yet you're telling me that that's not good because it gives you a pretty profound increase in mood and energy. So I feel like these are a lot of absolutist terms based on maybe things that you've read and maybe your experiences over time, but maybe you haven't reflected on this deep enough to see all the moving parts and kind of like the nuances of it all. Like this isn't a good or bad type of thing. You can't just be like, ginseng like freaking stimulated the crap out of me, therefore it is bad for everyone. Or rhodiola over time had a bad effect for me, therefore it's bad for everybody. Maybe you just haven't seen all the different people claiming rhodiola has changed your life for the better over the long term, and they've taken it over the long term with no negative side effects and no breaks. I don't know. All right, moving on. He added one last kind of part to this. David Chung says, I just have added ginseng, a half a teaspoon per day into my stack. It has been 3 weeks. I don't like it. It's affecting my sleep and thinking. Its effects seem to be similar to that of elderberry in terms of improving in athletics. I didn't even know elderberry had any effects on athletics, honestly. But I've never really been interested in elderberry because its immune claims, I've already found other things are way better, but... he says, with dirtier side effects of Alcar. And that I mentioned that I had to cut back on my dosage, and he'll do the same and see if it helps, and have quite a bit of it, so his experiment with ginseng will last a while. Yeah, so I'm going to tell you this. Ginseng, 100%, will overstimulate you in a choline sense of the way if you take way too much at the beginning. And remember, when we talk about things like dopamine, testosterone, and when we talk about fucking choline, what we're really doing is we're working with mental models of conceptualizing how things work. We're not talking about, factually speaking, ginseng increases choline. We're just trying to conceptualize its effects so that we can kind of get a general understanding of how we might feel when we take it, right? And ginseng, 100%, I have found the same thing, as I mentioned many times before. And I think I saw a comment from this David Chung guy on a later video of mine saying that even with a lower dose of ginseng, like 1/4 of a teaspoon of the whole root powder, that he still had negative side effects on sleep and things. And so for me, what I found is a low dose of ginseng, okay? I'm talking 1/4 of a teaspoon to 1/2 a teaspoon, taken for 3 to 4 days. 100% I have felt amazing benefits in energy, motivation, and strength. And the effects on strength performance and recovering from strength training over the long term, whether I sleep or not, somehow my lifts just keep going up with ginseng. Lots and lots of people have said that it increases their runs tremendously and all these things. However, I have definitely found, because I just recently have done another ginseng experiment, I have found that if you overdo ginseng even just a little bit for a little too long, your sleep will go away completely. However, I have found in the past taking a low enough dose that after a while, it has a regulating effect on sleep and benefits it tremendously. So, this might just have to go back to what we were talking about earlier about equilibrium and building up the enzymatic adaptations the so-called hormetic effect of ginseng, that if you take just a small enough dose in the short term, and if you've overdone ginseng, you need to just cut it out altogether, because it will have a lasting effect that builds up over time. There's studies that show even a month after you stop ginseng, it still has the so-called positive benefits of it that last, right? Because it's supposed to work on your baseline level of functioning. You need to just cut it out altogether for about a month, then reintroduce it at like 1/8 of a teaspoon, right? But anyway, there's other things out there that might work better for you. But for me, if I overdo ginseng, it's terrible. Like, I just don't want to even do anything like throughout the day, because I just feel super agitated and restless but can't sleep. And my mind will start to go crazy. Go to places where I don't want to be. It just speeds everything up way too much. But if you take just the right amount of dose, it makes you feel motivated, dopaminergic, testosterone type of thing, where I just want to attack my goals and progress in life and lift weights and all this stuff. But a little bit goes a long way. There is a reason why tonic herbs and adaptogens are constantly referred to as, you know, long-term building of energy. You can't just take even a slightest bit of a bigger dose for you. It's gonna be different for everyone, and then expect to just like have free coasting, right, and feel good. So anyway, let's wrap all this up. Moral of the story is, number one, okay, like I said at the very beginning, okay, you have to be very, very skeptical about the studies, your assumptions about these herbs, the so-called effects that other people say they're having, and then your own experiments as well, and the mechanisms of action underlying all of this. And you have to understand that herbs, nutrition, health, and exercise and training, you have to take a philosophical approach to this, and an experiential, real-world experiment approach, and a scientific approach. You have to combine philosophy, you have to combine experiments in the real world, and the reductionism that we have from science, all together, and still keep an open mind about what's actually happening. Because science, there's not a lot of studies on anything related to health, exercise, nutrition, disease prevention, herbs, supplements, even pharmaceuticals, okay, despite what they'll tell you, that shows significant findings, okay? No matter how many people in the study, no matter how much of a long-term study it might be, whatever, even randomized controlled trials. And, you know, the dosing makes all, like, you have to think of these herbs, and this is what this guy's basically saying is, like, these herbs are profoundly powerful, and you should not take them lightly. You should understand, take them just as, like, a powerful, potent medication, which is what they've always traditionally been prescribed for. You can't just be like, ginseng, brah. It is like this freaking miracle thing, and it's a natural substance, brah. Therefore, it's just fine, has no negative side effects. It's all natural, therefore it's good. And it's like, bro, like, appeal to nature, you know, no. Like, you can't overdose on it because it's natural, brah. Like, first of all, what the hell does natural even mean? If I take a shit in the toilet, that's natural. You know, and also, technically, most isolated drugs come from a natural substance anyway. Technically, it's naturally derived. So, you know, what we're really talking about is the entourage effect of the other polyphenols in the whole plant compared to isolated plant having a balancing effect. However, so the moral of the damn story here is, be freaking careful. Be intelligent when you take these herbs. And the overall sentiment of what David Chung is saying is accurate. Like, a little bit goes a long way. The dose makes the poison. The effects can change over time. And you can't be cognitively lazy with this. You can't just take a cheap supplement from Walmart and expect it to work. You can't just, take a large megadose and then expect to not, be cracked out on some ginseng, right? You gotta be careful. Leave your question, comments down below. Hopefully this helped y'all, and I'll talk to y'all next time.